Ken Jones is on a solo mission to climb Romania's highest peak. Alone and miles from civilization, his quest becomes a fight for survival when he's hit by an avalanche.
I ran as fast and as frantic as I could. I was running for my life.
He's thrown down the mountain. His pelvis is shattered.
It was agony, like a red-hot poke was being pushed into the side of my leg.
Unable to walk, he has no way to call for help. His only hope, an agonizing 8-mile crawl. Across rivers and through a frozen wilderness. His greatest fears are being eaten alive or freezing to death.
One slip, I'd be dead.
Journeying into the heart of the Transylvanian Alps, a remote region of central Romania, is Ken Jones, a former British paratrooper in search of a holiday with a difference.
I think I'm quite a nomadic person. I tend to spend quite a lot of time on my own. I've always got an urge to travel or go off and do things. It just seems to be in my blood. I get restless and I need to go.
Ken's military background has given him a taste for extreme adventure, and he's chosen to challenge himself in one of Europe's wildest landscapes.
Romania ticked a lot of boxes for me. I just wanted to remove myself from a tourist trail. I wanted a challenge, somewhere I could make life a little bit tougher for myself.
He's on a solo mission to climb Mount Moldova now, but it's not for the faint-hearted. At 8,300 feet, it's Romania's highest peak. And in the depths of winter, even reaching the mountain is a risky business.
It was a crazy and dangerous journey. The taxi driver's just driving like a lunatic up the road. I just thought, what the hell am I doing? This is probably as dangerous as the mountain.
In the summer, this wild landscape would be teeming with hikers. But in mid-January, the snow and sub-freezing temperatures mean few people are brave enough to venture alone into these unforgiving mountains.
I became aware of just more or less having the whole mountain range to myself. It was a nice feeling, but it was kind of scary as well. You become aware of your own smallness.
Normally, it's a 2-day climb to the top of the mountain. But super-fit ex-army man Ken has challenged himself to conquer it in a single day.
Me and my brothers were always really competitive. We'd always race each other to the bus stop each morning, and on the way to school, everything was a race. I do like the feeling of my body working and functioning well, and I soon found a good rhythm. I'm a fanatical lover of freedom. And sometimes you've just got to put yourself out on your own just to enjoy a different kind of peace.
Ken's made light work of the lower slopes. But hazardous terrain ahead threatens his ambitious bid for the summit. A clear channel through the trees offers the most direct route to the top. This man-made fire break prevents the spread of fires in the summer months, but in winter, it's a hotspot for deadly avalanches.
I did an Arctic warfare course in the army, and I knew about the possibility of avalanches. I was well versed in drills and how to deal with them.
With his goal in sight, Ken ignores the risks and opts to fast-track it to the top.
The snow on these upper reaches of the slope was more of a fine powder. And at points I'd sink up to my waist. My going slowed down significantly, and it became really hard work. There was a ramp. It was a really steep wall, so I needed to rely heavily on my crampons and my ice axe, and that was pretty tricky. At one point I got halfway up, and I just slipped.
The fall serves as a warning. The mountain is treacherous, but Ken is determined to keep going. Ken retraces his steps and soon passes the point of his slip. With effort comes reward. His choice of extreme location is starting to pay off.
I really felt like I was in my own world up there. I was totally exposed and totally alone. This is as remote as I'd ever been. Very few people are privileged with having a whole mountain range to themselves.
But the punishing conditions have put him behind his ambitious schedule. Few hours of daylight remain, and the clock is ticking on his bid for the top.
I knew with the amount of snow on the mountain it would be pretty tough, but I felt really fit and strong. I trained hard, and so I felt good about getting to the top.
Sheer athleticism and extraordinary determination bring him within reach of his goal. But as the sun sets, he must decide whether to make a last-ditch push for the top or retreat to shelter and make a second attempt in the morning.
I kept hoping that the snow level would change or be a bit more friendly to me. I kept walking a bit more, not quite wanting to give up, but doubts started coming into my mind as to whether I'd make the top that day. Summits are always important, but there comes a point when you've got to say, enough's enough, don't do anything silly.
Reluctantly, Ken opts to return to the relative safety of the trees.
The plan was to get securely into the forest so I could dig a snow hole or set up my poncho. I didn't want to be exposed on the open slope, and, the trees offered some natural shelter.
At night, the mountain will be even more treacherous. Ken needs to descend quickly and find level ground to camp. Again, the firebreak offers the most direct route. But following it is a dangerous strategy.
All of a sudden, there was just a noise from the top of a mountain. At first, I thought it was something like an animal. It was so strange and unearthly. I'd never heard anything like it before. And then I realized that this is an avalanche. I was transfixed. I'd never seen an avalanche before. In a way, it was perverse. I just wanted to look at it. I should have turned and run, but it's just something so big and magnificent.
But Ken has no time to lose. Each passing second brings him closer to death.
I turned my back on it and run as fast into the forest as I could possibly make it. And all the time I could feel like it was chasing me. My heart was beating, it was just going crazy. It was going to hit me, bury me. I thought I was going to die.
Ken dives to safety in the nick of time, and the avalanche is funneled down the fire break.
It would have definitely killed me without a doubt. I was pretty shaken for a while. And then when I realised I was safe and I calmed down, then I just started to laugh.
He's had a narrow escape, but he's still in danger. The snow on these upper slopes is unstable.
After the avalanche, I began to feel really vulnerable on the slope. I need to find somewhere safe to sleep. So I wanted to drop down, get deeper into the forest, sleep for the night, and still possibly be able to make an ascent the next day.
It's now a race to descend to safer ground before nightfall. But through the trees, the going quickly gets tough.
But the terrain became more treacherous. Branches were poking in my eye. It was becoming a bit of a nightmare.
The rough terrain and the slope of the mountain forces him back onto open ground.
I knew the quickest passage was down the fire break between the trees. I didn't want to go anywhere near it again. But I had no choice. I had to go down it.
But taking this shortcut is a serious gamble. In his race against the light, Ken decides it's a risk worth taking. But his luck has run out. The mountain is about to show him how lethal it can be. This time it's on him in an instant. It's run or die.
I ran as fast and as frantically as I could. I was running for my life. And then the next thing I knew, it pulled me off my feet. I was utterly terrified. It swallows you and engulfs you. You can feel all your bones and organs inside, everything's rattling. All of a sudden, I was falling. And then I was thinking, this is really bad. I landed on my ass and I heard a massive crack. And that was my pelvis shattering and the head of my femur snapping off. I must have lost consciousness. I lay there, not knowing what was happening or where I was. I couldn't really feel anything. It was dark.
The fall has inflicted a bloody gash to his head. But Ken is about to discover that his body has suffered a far more deadly blow.
The pain finally hit me. It was absolute agony. It was like a red-hot poke was just being pushed into the side of my leg.
The impact has broken his femur and smashed his hip joint through his pelvis, shattering it to pieces. Bone fragments have severed blood vessels around the pelvis, causing internal bleeding and making his core body temperature plummet. In this extreme environment, his injuries could prove fatal. Ken knows it's bad, but is unaware of the full extent of the damage.
I sat up and started assessing my situation. As I put my hand to the side of my leg, my left hand felt wet and sticky, and I got a big open wound on a couple of inches on the side of my left hip. It was bleeding quite heavily.
He needs to act quickly to prevent further loss of blood, which could harm his chances of survival.
I managed to force myself to roll on my side. Pulled a first field dressing from my pocket. And that seemed to stem a flow of blood. And after I dressed it, I pulled my trousers back up and I decided not to look at it again. My natural instinct was to get up and walk. My leg was in pain, but I wasn't sure if it was broken. I felt a jolt of agonizing pain shoot up my leg, and it became apparent that there was no way in hell I could walk. My leg was gone. It was a pretty desperate situation.
He's in urgent need of medical attention, but he's 8 miles from the nearest village and has no mobile or satellite phone. With military discipline, he's packed for the harsh conditions, but the avalanche has torn off his backpack and buried it further up the mountain.
I was deprived of all my provisions, my sleeping bag, my stove, my meals, everything I needed to survive.
Nobody knows where Ken is or the danger he's in. If he's to cheat death, the stamina and self-reliance that brought him here must now get him out. But he faces a tough dilemma. Go up in the vain hope of finding his life-saving kit, or conserve precious time and energy and descend in search of help.
It was a real tough decision to know what to do. The implications of making the wrong decision were deadly.
He then spots his torch, which has fallen from his backpack and miraculously turned itself on.
This torch was now my best means of survival. If I could get the torch, and I'd possibly have a chance, even if it's a small one, of finding my other items of kit. I'd have a bit more food. I'd have a sleeping bag. It was small distance, but it was so painful and so difficult to cover the ground.
Ken finds his hat and a waterproof sack before eventually salvaging his torch. But hopes of recovering his backpack and sleeping bag are futile. His route is blocked by a vertical ledge.
Under normal conditions, I could have negotiated it effortlessly. But like this, it was impossible. It was a pathetic effort, and I just fell over backwards. My leg folded up underneath me, but it just wrenched at the joint.
He has 2 options: to keep searching for his kit, or conserve time and energy and head back down the slope to find help.
I decided I was going to go back down the mountain. The least difficult way of moving was in a sitting position. Every time I moved, I could just feel bone grating and sliding inside of me. I'd be retching in agony.
Ken has trained hard, but nothing has prepared him for this pain. For over an hour, he descends with gritted teeth until he finds flatter ground to rest. But it's only the beginning of his ordeal. The foot on his broken leg is painfully swollen. He needs to ease the pressure immediately, or gangrene will take his foot.
I realised the implications of not getting my left boot off really quickly. I could feel the bones grating and moving around in my leg. I mean, I had to inflict this pain upon myself. There's no other option. If I didn't get the boot off, I was going to lose my foot. It was almost blissful just to have my feet free, and all the blood that was stuck in my foot could work its way back up my leg.
The relief is short-lived. At night, temperatures plunge rapidly to as low as -15 degrees. His only protection is a mountain jacket and a waterproof sack which he uses to shield his feet from the biting wind. His body desperately needs food to provide him with energy to fight off the cold. His last provisions are stowed in his pocket, and it's vital he rations them carefully.
I had a small plastic bag with some crushed sausage rolls. I got kind of careless, and before I knew anything, it was gone. I'd eaten the packet.
Ken faces a long night ahead. The idea of being alone in the middle of nowhere preys on his mind.
The scenarios that are running through my head were, I don't know, what if I don't get through the night?
If he falls asleep, his body will stop shivering. He'll develop hypothermia, and he'll die.
I was shivering so heavily I knew that I'd fall into the last stages of hypothermia and I'd never wake up. I just thought, oh God, how am I going to get through this night? Just don't fall asleep or you'll never wake, you're going to die. Sleep was a potential death sentence, and it's constantly beckoning you, and it's so easy to do. And you realise as well, all you've got to do is shut your eyes, and you're not in pain anymore.
Facing a long and tortuous night alone in the wilderness, Ken's spirits hit rock bottom.
I just thought, how can time do this to me? It felt like a lifetime had passed. There's maybe 7 or 8 more hours to go through yet, and it's going to get colder. By 3 or 4 in the morning, the temperature's going to plummet even further. As time went on, I got more lonely. I thought about all sorts of strange things, comforting things like being warm in bed, and I thought about my brother and playing football and anything to distract my mind from the pain and the suffering I was in. The night was just a battle to stay awake. When daylight did arrive, it was overwhelming. It was such a relief. And the darkness can bring all this paranoia, and with the daylight I realised I could do something.
In the early hours of a cold mid-January morning, the chances of anyone being in this inhospitable wilderness are remote. Ken only has himself to rely on, but the enormity of the task ahead preys on his mind, and he can't help hoping for rescue.
I kind of had it in my mind. Maybe emergency services would be called out. I imagined a helicopter or a couple of mountain rescue guys just walking through the forest blowing a whistle. I imagined all these little scenarios, but the more I thought about them, I just dismissed them. I was pinning so much hopes on so many slight what-ifs.
With his pelvis shattered, Ken knows he's in big trouble. Nobody knows of his ordeal or is expecting him back anytime soon. With no mobile or satellite phone, his only hope is that his training in hostile environments can get him to the nearest village, 8 miles from the mountain.
My army instructors always said, don't stand still, move and innovate or die. You've got to constantly be assessing your situations. As soon as you stop that thought process, it's all over. You can't think your way out of trouble. Your body's just a tool that will carry out the plan you formulate in your mind. You've got to do something.
With no food and his water bottle already drained, Ken sets out on his marathon journey down the mountain. He endures hours of bone-crunching effort, but covers little ground, and the exertion gives him a raging thirst. He's surrounded by water, but it's frozen. Eating the snow just lowers his body's core temperature and causes further dehydration.
I did eat snow. It would just melt into the smallest amount of water, so it wouldn't really quench my thirst.
A river in the valley below will give him the water he desperately needs. But Ken also knows that it leads back to the track where the taxi dropped him off 24 hours ago.
I figured it'd be the most likely place I could be rescued, so I just needed to get there and make as much ground as possible.
After an agonizing descent, Ken makes it off the steep slopes of the mountain. It's an incredible feat, but moving in the valley below poses an even tougher challenge.
When I hit the valley floor, there was no more sitting down and sliding, no more assistance from gravity. It was all physical exertion from then on.
Facing an enormous task to reach civilization, Ken sets small goals to measure his progress.
I started trying to play these little games of beating the clock. I'd set myself times to get to targets.
His progress is painfully slow. Each new target reached is a massive achievement, but also a harrowing reminder of the mammoth task ahead. Time is running out on his chances of survival, and he's still 7 miles from the nearest village.
My desire to keep moving was just to reach water. I was so dehydrated, I'd exerted myself so heavily.
After a brutal crawl along the valley floor, Ken finally reaches the river.
The banks were higher than the water level, so it was kind of hard for me to reach down and get access to the water. So I had the idea of tying the ends of my shoelaces around the neck of a bottle. The relief on my mouth was blissful. It was like petrol going into a car. I just felt my body reviving, being full of energy again.
Re-energized, Ken wills himself on, in search of the road he hopes will lead him to help. But he soon finds that access along the bank is blocked. The river, which provided him life-sustaining water, has now become his greatest obstacle. He's left with no choice but to cross.
I didn't want to accept I was going to have to cross the stream. I just sat down the bank looking at it. This is a mountain stream in the middle of January. It's as cold as it could get without completely freezing over. One slip, get my jacket wet. I'd give myself 20 minutes to live and I'd be dead. I was just delaying thinking about it, and I was getting scared and terrified and thinking, what if? So I just thought, just get in the stream and cross it. It's as simple as that.
The human body loses heat 25 times faster in cold water. One slip in the stream, and Ken could quickly freeze to death.
I was shivering uncontrollably, my body was shaking violently, and I was gasping for breath. I could feel it rising up my legs, and I just thought, how am I going to do this? I just thought, tough it out, take your jacket off. I threw it across the stream. I just went, there you go, and now you've got to go and get it, or you'll be dead.
It takes him an hour to cross the stream.
I sat there for a few seconds, just shocked, trying to get my breath back. The stream, I just thought, that's it. It can't get any worse now. I must have done it.
Sheer grit and determination drive him onwards. But after crawling all day, he's barely covered a mile. Now facing another long night alone in this savage landscape, he's suddenly consumed by his greatest fear: being eaten alive by wild animals.
Transylvania is full of bears and wolves, and as the day was drawing to a close, I began to panic. I was so out in the open, still far away from the trees. I was scared, and I'd try and crawl as fast as I possibly could.
He makes it to cover, but the scent of his blood-soaked body and his weakened state makes him easy prey.
I was really hungry, cold, dehydrated. I think it affected me. I wasn't sure if I was hallucinating or hearing things. I really believed I was hearing packs of wolves surrounding me. I was convinced I could see eyes just looking at me. I'd just sit there panting, like breathing heavily, really scared, just waiting for them to attack me. I just thought, this is going to be horrible. Just being eaten's horrible, but to be eaten alive is just something else. When night came on that third day, the relief was like nothing else. I'd pulled through. It was such a big achievement.
Crippled by a broken leg and shattered pelvis, Ken desperately needs to reach the village 6 miles away, or face certain death in this hostile wilderness. After 2 punishing nights without food or sleep, it's a fight for survival, and nature is a formidable opponent.
It started to snow. And I know the sky seemed to close down above me, and just got this isolated feeling. A storm was coming, and then within a few minutes the snow was powering down. It seemed that the environment was just conspiring against me constantly. It felt pretty harsh and cruel, and you just become aware of how savage the mountains and the foothills can be.
It's been 48 hours since the avalanche nearly took Ken's life. Fighting his way through the snowstorm takes every last ounce of energy. And the cold, hunger, and dehydration are driving him to despair.
It's hard to keep moving because you think dying doesn't seem like such a bad proposition. At least all this pain's going to be over. You fall asleep and you can die. And I thought about my brothers and my sister. My mum as well. I'm close to my mum. Really close to my mum. I just got this idea and thought of someone coming round to my house and telling my mum and my brothers and sisters that I was dead. At this stage, I wasn't really sure why I was moving anymore. I thought to myself, this is what dying feels like then. So you're dying now. I was really lonely. I didn't want to die alone. So I just kept. I just kept moving and picking. Give us a minute, boys.
He's running on every last reserve just to stay alive, and now faces his third night alone in the wilderness. He hasn't slept in 2 days, but in these sub-freezing conditions, sleep means certain death.
I wanted to keep moving. My body, it just decided it was gonna stop. I woke up the next morning and I just thought, oh, you're not dying. You're still here. And it's like my body wanted to stay alive. I'd come to a standstill the night before and heavy snowfall had landed on me and totally cocooned my body, and I think it must have kept me alive and kept me warm. And I decided to start crawling again.
His shattered hip means every move is pure torture. Only his incredible fitness and superhuman reserves of willpower drive him on. In spite of the pain, he's confident the worst is over.
It'd be stupid to even conceive of it getting more difficult. I've just got to get to the track. It's not going to be far away. One big final effort today, and you know, I'll be safe.
At last, Ken is within reach of the road where the taxi dropped him off 3 days before. But suddenly, getting there looks impossible. A river blocks his path, and Ken knows just how deadly this might be.
When I saw that there was no passage through, I was really angry. I just realised I was getting back in the stream again. Except this time, yeah, it was going to be hell. I remember when I was little, I used to go on the big diving board at the swimming pool, and I'd be so scared to jump. And here I was sat on the edge of a stream, and I was putting myself through that same suffering. So I thought, just get in the stream.
The ice-cold water could kill him in minutes. He needs to cross it quickly, but the far bank is too steep for Ken to haul himself out. Supporting himself by leaning on the bank, he's got to track along the river until he finds a suitable place to cross.
I was moving inches and inches, and it was painfully slow. It was freezing cold.
For over an hour, Ken struggles along the river until the opposite bank is low enough for him to crawl out. But the current is strong and the water is deep. He'll either make it or die.
Throughout this ordeal, it was just such a vital mission not to get my jacket wet. And again, I knew if that got wet, I was dead.
His jacket and thermal top must come off. If they get soaked, he'll freeze on the other side. But by taking them off, he's increasing the risk of hypothermia, which could kill him.
I was left with no other choice. It was a matter of being patient and being careful, and I just had to get across.
With his severe injuries, Ken takes tiny hops on his good leg, letting the current carry his broken limb. One false move, and he could quickly freeze to death.
All of a sudden, I became aware of my boot becoming loose, and before I could react, my boot come off my foot.
His boot is swept away by the river, and the foot on his good leg is now exposed. He makes it to the bank, but with a 3-mile crawl through the snow ahead, frostbite is guaranteed.
And my first thought was, I'm going to lose my foot. I'm going to get frostbite. I just thought, oh God, what am I going to do now? When you get to a point where you don't actually care anymore, you don't really miss your family, or you're not really bothered about them, you don't even care for yourself that much. There's something inside you, a survival instinct, and it will keep you moving. The body will do what it has to do to survive. It's just an incredibly reliant and efficient machine. It's kind of amazing to realise that about the body.
Ken's never-say-die attitude finally pays off. He escapes the savage wilderness and reaches the road where the taxi left him 4 days earlier.
It came as a massive relief to finally reach the track, but I still knew I got a long way to go.
It's still 3 miles to the nearest village, and Ken's body is running on empty. He's fought through snow, hunger, and grueling pain. He's numbed by the cold, but he knows time is now running out. He needs to get help quick, or die.
So I figured, why don't I try and stand and walk? It was okay for a few seconds, and then there was a big crunch, and I felt bones grating up my leg. Even though it caused me a lot of pain, I just thought if I could find some sort of a stick to just take a part of the weight, then, you know, I could use it as a crutch. It was such a relief to be walking. It seemed like there was no more enemies or obstacles. I felt it was more or less home and dry.
But his ordeal is far from over.
And all of a sudden, it felt like I'd just been stabbed in the stomach with a knife. There'd been no pain like this. It was the worst pain I've ever felt, or the worst pain imaginable.
The stress of Ken's ordeal is causing his body to produce stomach acid at such lethal levels. It's perforating the lining of his gut. The acid flowing into his abdominal cavity is literally eating him from the inside. It's a ticking time bomb that could kill him within hours.
At this point, it was all about tonight. I had to make it back. There was no way I could make another night. While I was on this track, I wouldn't stop walking.
Every excruciating move is a step in the right direction. But the road ahead turns into his worst nightmare. The route splits, and only one way leads to the village. It's 50-50 he'll make it to help.
The track looked less well trodden, but something told me there was a house up there. And when I reached a clearing, I saw the outline of a building. I thought, this is it. It brought me enormous relief. I felt like I'd made it, and I was literally within steps of safety and warmth.
But his gamble has failed. The building is just an empty barn.
It was a crushing blow. I'd made this turn up the track, and it was a wrong decision, and I just thought, I hope this decision's not going to cost me my life.
Once more, Ken draws on his inner strength to drive him from death's door.
I didn't feel I was ready to die. I felt a bit of resentment towards the mountain. I wasn't going to let it beat me now, after all I'd been through.
But his body is approaching total collapse, and he's wasted precious time taking the wrong route. He must now retrace every harrowing step back to the fork in the road. It's getting dark, and temperatures are starting to plummet.
I reached a fork in the road again, and then I took my only other option, and I felt relieved again. I thought, well, there's only this way now. And eventually I turned a corner, and I saw a light spill through the trees. And it brought a smile to my face. I just thought, I've done it, and just realised what an honest, faithful servant your body is, and I just felt really proud of myself then. I knew I'd got a strong heart and character, and I could get through things. Fought for my life, and there was no sadness or bitterness towards the mountain or anything that happened. I'd made it back, and it was just so comforting to be with someone and realise that it all come to an end. I was safe.
Pioneering surgery repaired his hip and leg, but Ken lost 4 toes to frostbite. 2.5 years after the accident, he was finally able to walk again.
So few people get the opportunity to learn about themselves so intimately, and I feel privileged to have had to face such struggles to get where I am now, and I'd say that's a good thing.
Ken is now fighting fit and is hoping to one day compete in the challenging Tour de France.